Helena had always believed that love was something built in silence. She was never the kind of woman who demanded constant attention or grand declarations. From an early age, she learned that stability came from continuous effort, daily care, and quiet sacrifice when necessary. And that was exactly how she loved Ricardo. For 12 years, on the day of the divorce, the silence was unbearable. The courthouse hallway was too long, too white, too impersonal to contain everything she felt. People walked by in a hurry, lawyers discussed cases, doors opened and closed, as if it were just another ordinary morning. But for Helena, that day marked the official erasure of an entire life. Ricardo walked a few steps ahead of her. His suit was perfectly pressed, his phone in his hand, his expression focused. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look sad. If anything, he looked relieved. "Let's get this done quickly," he told the lawyer, without even looking at her. Helena heard it, and she understood. It wasn't urgency with the process, it was urgency to be done with her. During the hearing, Helena answered everything in a low, polite, almost automatic voice. When asked if she agreed with the terms, she said yes. Not because they were fair, but because she was tired of fighting alone. Ricardo never fought with her, only against her. When it was over, he stood up first, adjusted his jacket, extended his hand out of courtesy, a cold, almost procedural gesture. "I wish you luck," he said. Luck. 12 years reduced to a hollow word. Helena shook his hand, feeling a coldness that didn't come only from his skin. Ricardo turned and walked away without looking back. He didn't ask where she would live. He didn't ask how she would manage. He didn't ask if she was okay. In that moment, Helena realized something too painful to ignore. She had stopped existing to him long before the divorce. Outside, the sky was overcast. It wasn't raining, but the air felt heavy. Helena stopped on the sidewalk, gripping her bag tightly, as if it were the only thing still keeping her upright. She didn't cry, not yet. Crying required energy, and she had spent all of hers trying to be enough for someone who never truly saw her. Helena met Ricardo when she still believed partnership meant walking side by side. She had her own dreams. She had worked hard to build a career, had plans for growth, and possessed a strong, though quiet personality. Ricardo was drawn to that at first. He said he admired her intelligence, her calm, her ability to solve problems. "You balance me," he used to say. But over time, balance turned into one-sided dependence. As Ricardo's career grew, Helena slowly fell behind, not because she lacked ability, but because she was pushed into choosing him first. He needed to travel. He needed someone to organize everything. He needed a wife who was always available. "It's just for a while," he promised. The while became years. Helena gave up promotions, declined invitations, silenced her opinions, always believing that, someday, it would be her turn. It never was. Whenever she talked about returning to her career, Ricardo sighed impatiently. "Now isn't the time. Don't you see how much pressure I'm under? We'll talk about it later." Later never came, until another woman did. Not with drama, not with shouting or confessions. She arrived the same way everything else in that marriage did, quietly. Helena discovered it by accident. Messages, timelines that didn't match. Lies too small to justify. When she confronted Ricardo, he didn't deny it. "It happened," he said. "That was all. No apology. No attempt to repair. Just the cold acknowledgement of someone who had already moved on." The divorce was fast because he was ready. She wasn't. Helena left with little money, no immediate plan, and a void that was hard to describe. But there was something Ricardo never realized. Helena was not alone. Helena drove for hours without turning on the radio. The silence inside the car was different from the silence of the courthouse. It wasn't cold, it was heavy. Every mile put more distance between her body and the life she had lost, and brought her mind closer to something she had avoided for years, who she had been before becoming someone's wife. The road that led back to her childhood home was old and winding, bordered by trees that seemed to resist time the same way her family had resisted loss. When the gate finally appeared, Helena felt her chest tighten. She wasn't returning as a visitor, she was returning wounded. After parking, she couldn't get out of the car right away. She sat there with her hands on the steering wheel, breathing deeply, holding back a sob that threatened to spill without control. The front door opened before she could ring the bell. Augusto was there. Her oldest brother had always seemed larger than life, not because of his size, but because of his presence, a respected attorney, accustomed to carrying the weight of difficult decisions. He looked at Helena and asked nothing. He simply embraced her. That was where she collapsed. Not gracefully, not quietly. She cried with her face buried in his shoulder, like she had when she was younger and believed older brothers were invincible. Augusto didn't say a word. He just held her firmly, as if saying without speaking, "You're here, now you can rest." Inside the house, the others already knew. Daniel rose calmly from the couch, assessing her state with the analytical gaze he used in business. Miguel observed in silence, as he always did, reading the room before acting. Lucas immediately put his phone away. Raphael, the youngest, was the only one who couldn't hide his anger. He had no right, he said. Helena tried to explain, to minimize, just as she had done her entire life. It wasn't that simple. It wasn't all his fault. Miguel interrupted her, his voice low but firm. You don't have to defend anyone here. Those words struck Helena like a jolt. In that moment, she realized how conditioned she was to justify the unjustifiable. That night, they all sat around the table. No one asked for details of the divorce. No one asked about the affair, the money, or the agreements. They talked about ordinary things. Work, travel, everyday problems. It was as if they were teaching Helena how to exist again outside of pain. Later, alone in the bedroom where she had slept as a teenager, Helena looked around. The walls still bore old marks. The closet still creaked the same way. Everything seemed smaller than in her memory, except the feeling of safety. She lay down and cried again. This time, not for Ricardo, but for herself. For everything she had stopped being. In the days that followed, her brothers gradually revealed the power each of them had built not as a display, but as context. Augusta was known for taking on complex cases, for confronting people no one else wanted to face. Daniel ran operations that crossed borders. Miguel was consulted before major investments were made. Lucas moved through environments where decisions shaped destinies. Raphael, despite being the youngest, had already sold one company and launched another. But inside that house, none of them were powerful. They were simply brothers. Helena noticed something that startled her. She had never been treated as lesser there, never as dependent, never as fragile. Ricardo had always made it seem like she needed him. There, she didn't have to prove anything. As the weeks passed, Helena began to reorganize herself, not with urgency, not with announcements, just with small, deliberate movements. She woke early, she read, she studied. She wrote old ideas in a notebook she found at the back of a drawer, projects she had abandoned because they were not a priority. Miguel noticed, "You still think like a strategist," he remarked one evening. "You were just dormant." Those words stayed with her. Helena began helping informally with small decisions, not as a professional, just as an observer. And something curious happened. Problems started to resolve faster when she spoke. Daniel noticed that a negotiation on the brink of failure turned around after a conversation Helena suggested. Lucas realized a political strategy gained strength when she pointed out a silent resistance no one else had seen. "Have you always been like this?" Raphael asked one day. Helena smiled, without humor. "Always. I was just never heard." That realization hurt. She understood that for years she hadn't lacked ability, she had lacked space. And now, she had space. Helena made a quiet decision. She didn't need to start over from nothing. She just needed to stop hiding. Helena spent a long time believing she had to start from zero. That idea frightened her more than the divorce itself. Starting over felt like admitting that everything she had lived before had been wasted. Deep down, she knew that wasn't true. Nothing had been lost. Everything had been interrupted. She began slowly. She didn't open a company right away. She didn't announce projects. She didn't explain her plans to anyone outside the family. For weeks, Helena simply observed people, conversations, decisions. She realized something she had always done instinctively, but had never named. She understood human dynamics, while her brothers discussed numbers, contracts, and strategy. Helena paid attention to who spoke too much, who stayed silent, who agreed out of fear, who resisted out of insecurity. She noticed the invisible conflicts. Miguel noticed her noticing. "You see things that don't show up on spreadsheets," he said one night. "Because spreadsheets don't show ego, pride, or fear," she replied. The sentence lingered in the air. That was when something began to take shape. Helena started helping in small, informal ways. A comment here, a question there, nothing official. But strangely, problems began to soften when she spoke. Daniel noticed that a supplier conflict dissolved after Helena suggested a private conversation instead of another meeting. Lucas realized a political alliance strengthened after she pointed out an unspoken resentment that had been ignored. "You were always this sharp?" Raphael asked. Helena smiled faintly. "I was always paying attention." She didn't say the rest out loud. No one ever asked. That realization cut deeper than she expected. For years, she had been capable enough to carry weight, but patient enough to remain invisible. She decided to study formally what she had always done intuitively. She enrolled in courses, immersed herself in books, and reconnected with former colleagues from college, people who remembered her as brilliant, decisive, insightful. They were surprised to hear how long she had been silent. Her brothers supported her only when she asked. They never pushed, never rushed her. They understood that this reconstruction had to be hers. Months later, Helena opened a small consulting practice. Nothing flashy, nothing loud. A discreet name, a simple office, a clear purpose. To help family-run businesses and leadership teams resolve internal conflicts before they became destructive. Her first client came through a referral, then another, then another. Helena didn't sell promises. She listened. She asked uncomfortable questions. She spoke difficult truths calmly, without humiliation. Many resisted at first, but they returned. Her growth was slow and solid. For the first time, Helena didn't need to adapt herself to exist. She was the center of her own decisions. Meanwhile, Ricardo began to feel the effects of her absence. At first, he didn't notice. He was too busy with his new life, his new relationship, his new plans. But small things started to fail. Internal conflicts surfaced. Key people drifted away without clear explanations. Decisions that once flowed easily began to stall. Ricardo blamed the market, blamed competitors, blamed everyone except the person who had always organized the chaos quietly. He tried calling Helena for the first time nearly a year after the divorce. She didn't answer, not out of revenge, but because she no longer needed to. Helena, on the other hand, began to recognize herself in the mirror. Not as a wife, not as an ex-wife, but as someone whole. One night, sitting alone in her office after everyone had left, she realized something that moved her deeply. She no longer felt afraid of the future. She felt curious, and that was new. Ricardo had always believed life was a simple equation. You applied pressure, demanded results, removed obstacles, and things worked. When Helena had been his wife, he thought of her as part of the system, a reliable mechanism, a stabilizing resource, never as someone whose absence would change the entire structure. That was why, when she left his life, he didn't feel the loss immediately. At first, it even felt easier. The house was quieter. There were no questions waiting for him at night, no conversations about feelings, no presence he interpreted as silent expectations. The woman he was now seeing fit better into the version of himself he preferred, admired, successful, emotionally unchallenged. The first signs of decline were too small to seem dangerous. A meeting that ran late because someone missed a detail. A social event poorly organized, followed by subtle but damaging comments. A supplier irritated by miscommunication that should have been obvious. Before, Helena noticed these risks before they exploded. Not because she controlled him, but because she read environments the way some people read weather, by subtle changes, quiet shifts, unspoken tension. Ricardo did not notice, or noticed too late. He grew irritable. At work, his team became more cautious around him. Ricardo without Helena was sharper, less patient, more volatile. He had the same ambition, the same ego, but now, there was no one absorbing the emotional impact of his decisions. When things went wrong, he blamed the market. He blamed the economy. He blamed incompetent people. The woman he was with began to notice the change. Ricardo was more impatient, more absent, more explosive over small things. When she tried to talk, he dismissed her concerns or retreated into silence. You're exaggerating, you're imagining things. The same phrases Helena had heard for years. The difference was that this woman didn't have Helena's endurance. She pulled away. And for the first time, Ricardo felt the weight of true isolation. Not the comfortable isolation of someone who chooses solitude, but the isolation of someone who loses people without understanding how. One night, after another chaotic day, Ricardo came home to an empty apartment. No lights, no message, no presence. He sat on the couch and, without intending to, began to remember. Helena organizing schedules. Helena warning about conflicts. Helena saying calmly, "This is going to cause problems." He had always ignored her. Now everything caused problems. Ricardo picked up his phone and opened Helena's professional profile. There was no excess, no triumph, no performative success. Just solid content, invitations, events, results. She wasn't showing off, she was busy. That realization hurt more than any accusation. Meanwhile, Helena continued to grow, not explosively, but consistently. She began receiving invitations to mediate larger conflicts, guide delicate family successions, and advise leadership teams under pressure. Always with the same posture, listening first, speaking later. Helena learned to say no. No to projects that didn't align with her values. No to people looking for saviors instead of solutions. No to environments where she would have to shrink herself. This was a profound shift. Before, she said yes to be accepted. Now, she said yes only when it made sense. Her brothers noticed. Augusto realized something important. Helena wasn't just growing professionally, she was rebuilding internal authority. That authority that doesn't depend on validation. One evening, gathered again at the childhood home, Raphael commented, "Have you noticed he's falling?" Helena knew exactly who he meant. "Yes," she said. "And how do you feel about it?" Helena paused. Relieved, she answered, "Because it's no longer my responsibility to hold together someone who refuses to change." Ricardo tried again to reach her. This time, not with vague words, but with a direct request to talk. Helena read the message. She didn't reply immediately. She had learned that responding too quickly was another way of placing herself second. Days later, she answered with only one sentence. "I don't see meaning in conversations that arrive too late." Ricardo felt the impact. For the first time, he had no argument. No justification, no explanation, only the late recognition that he had confused presence with guarantee. And guarantees don't exist when it comes to people. Ricardo began to realize something frightening. He wasn't just losing money, he was losing emotional credibility. People trusted him less, listened less, questioned more, and without noticing, he began to experience what Helena had lived for years, not being taken seriously. Helena never wanted visibility. What she wanted was stability and, above all, the certainty that she would never again disappear inside her own life. The consulting firm she opened grew quietly. It didn't become a loud brand or an aggressively marketed business. It became something more durable, a place people trusted. She worked primarily with family-run companies because she understood them deeply. She understood how love and resentment often occupied the same space, how loyalty could coexist with buried competition, how decisions were frequently driven by pride rather than clarity. What Helena did seemed simple to those watching from the outside. She listened, but listening the right way was rare. She asked questions most people avoided. Who truly holds power here? Who is being silenced in the name of harmony? Who benefits from things staying exactly the way they are? Who is being ignored and for how long? In one company, the founder was preparing to pass leadership to his son. On paper, everything looked aligned. In reality, nothing was. Father spoke of trust, but undermined every decision. The son appeared confident, but hesitated constantly. The team was divided, tense, and exhausted. Helena attended 3 meetings and then said something that froze the room. "The problem here isn't competence," she said calmly. "It's grief." Everyone looked at her. "You're confirming succession with words," she continued, looking at the father, but emotionally. "You're still mourning the idea of no longer being the center." The man flushed, visibly offended. For a moment, Helena thought she would be asked to leave. Instead, the room fell silent. After several long seconds, the father asked quietly, "And how do we fix that?" Helena didn't hesitate. "With truth," she said, "and with boundaries." 2 months later, the company had stabilized. That story spread. Another client came, then another. Soon, Helena was being recommended, not because she promised results, but because she restored clarity. Her brothers watched closely. Augusto saw her command rooms without intimidation. Daniel noticed how conflicts softened after her interventions. Miguel admired how she built growth without fragility. Lucas observed her impact expanding quietly. Raphael ensured her presence never turned into spectacle. Helena's reputation grew, not because she advertised herself, but because people felt safe telling her the truth. One evening, driving home after a long day, Helena pulled over and stared at the sky. She realized something that surprised her. She wasn't thinking about Ricardo anymore. Not in anger, not in comparison, not in validation. He had become irrelevant to her sense of self. That realization didn't make her feel victorious. It made her feel free. Meanwhile, Ricardo's situation worsened. Projects stalled. Partnerships dissolved. Decisions that once seemed obvious now led to confusion. The people around him grew cautious, less willing to absorb his volatility. He blamed circumstances. He always did. But late at night, alone, he began to suspect the truth. He hadn't just lost a wife. He had lost a person who quietly stabilized everything he touched. That understanding arrived slowly and painfully. The encounter did not happen in a dramatic setting. Real life rarely chooses cinematic stages. It happened at a business conference, where Helena had been invited to speak about leadership, reconstruction, and emotional strategy in professional environments. She stepped onto the stage calmly. Her clothes were elegant, but understated. Her posture was different now, not rigid, not defensive. It wasn't arrogance, it was presence. When Helena began to speak, the room grew quiet. She didn't rely on rehearsed phrases. She told real stories without exposing names. She spoke about poorly made decisions, about pride, about how highly competent people often destroy what they build because they don't know how to deal with emotion. Ricardo was there. He hadn't planned to be. He had been invited by someone else, and when he saw Helena's name on the program, curiosity mixed with discomfort pulled him inside. He walked in expecting to see his ex-wife reinventing herself with motivational cliches. That wasn't what he saw. He saw a woman who commanded the room without raising her voice. And worse, he saw people of influence listening to her the way they once listened to him. Ricardo felt a sharp sensation that wasn't just jealousy, it was recognition arriving far too late. As Helena spoke, she didn't look for approval. She didn't rush. She allowed pauses. She allowed silence to do part of the work. When she finished, the audience stood. Ricardo remained seated. For the first time, he understood with painful clarity. He hadn't lost an ordinary partner. He had discarded someone who quietly held structures together. Later, in the hallway, Helena was surrounded by people asking for meetings, exchanging cards, requesting conversations. Ricardo waited until the crowd thinned. Then he stepped closer. Helena saw him before he spoke. For a brief second, time folded in on itself, but only for a second, because she was no longer the woman who waited for explanations. "Ricardo," she said politely. He swallowed. "Helena, I didn't know you were—" He stopped, because nothing he could say would land well. Helena didn't smile, not out of coldness, but out of clarity. "You didn't know because you never wanted to know," she said calmly. Ricardo tried to maintain composure. "I was under a lot of pressure back then." Helena tilted her head slightly. "You always were," she replied. "You just chose to release it onto the person who loved you." The words landed cleanly. Ricardo inhaled sharply. Are you okay?" he asked, and Helena answered with the sentence that closed that chapter forever. "I'm better than you deserve to witness." She walked away, without hurry, without drama. Ricardo stayed where he was, feeling something he had never truly faced before, real regret. After that encounter, Ricardo could no longer pretend Helena was simply a closed chapter. He tried. He threw himself back into work, extended his hours, filled every gap with meetings and urgency. But something inside him had shifted, like a structure that looks intact from the outside while the foundation quietly cracks. The problem was that, unlike Helena, Ricardo had never learned how to look inward. Discomfort, to him, was something to overpower. He scheduled unnecessary meetings. He demanded immediate results. He pressured people who were already stretched thin. He believed that if he tightened control, everything would return to order. It didn't. The numbers began to reflect what he refused to acknowledge emotionally. One project missed its deadline. Another was canceled outright. A long-standing investor requested a contract review, something that had never happened before. "It's temporary," Ricardo said. "The market is unstable." But the market wasn't the problem. The problem was that Helena was no longer there to absorb the invisible shock of his decisions. Before, when Ricardo exploded in meetings, someone later repaired the damage. Before, when he bulldozed processes, someone reorganized the chaos. Before, when he ignored human signals, someone translated them. That someone was gone, Ricardo became more volatile. His team grew cautious. Conversations shortened. People stopped challenging him, not out of respect, but out of fatigue. The woman he was seeing noticed the change clearly. He was irritable, distracted, emotionally unavailable. When she tried to talk, he dismissed her concerns or shut down entirely. "You're overreacting. This is in your head." The same phrases Helena had endured for years, but this time, they didn't land. She pulled away, and for the first time, Ricardo felt the full weight of isolation. Not the chosen isolation of independence, but the isolation that comes when people quietly stop showing up. One night, after yet another failed day, Ricardo came home to an empty apartment. No lights, no sound, no message. He sat down and let the silence press in. Uninvited memories surfaced. Helena reorganizing schedules, Helena smoothing over conflicts, Helena saying calmly, "This will come back to hurt you." He had always brushed her off. Now, everything hurt. He picked up his phone and searched for Helena again, to call this time, but simply to look. Her professional presence was restrained. No grand statements, no victory laps. Just work, invitations, results. She wasn't trying to prove anything, she was living. That realization unsettled him deeply. At the same time, Helena's world continued expanding. Not loudly, not aggressively, but steadily. She began working with larger organizations, mediating disputes where money, legacy, and ego collided. She became known for her ability to lower emotional temperature without diminishing authority. Helena no longer rushed to fill silence. She allowed it. People talked more when she didn't interrupt. She learned something essential. Clarity often emerged when urgency was removed. Her brothers noticed the shift. Augusto said quietly one night, "You don't chase outcomes anymore." Helena nodded. "I build conditions," she replied. That difference mattered. Ricardo tried again. This time, not with a vague message, but with a direct request to talk. Helena read it. She didn't answer right away. She had learned that speed was not the same as availability. Days later, she responded with a single line. "I don't see purpose in conversations that arrive after everything has already been decided." The words landed heavily. For the first time, Ricardo had no rebuttal, no justification, no narrative that made him look reasonable. Only the slow recognition that he had mistaken access for permanence. And permanence does not exist in relationships. Ricardo began to sense something far more damaging than financial loss. He was losing trust. He was losing influence. People listened less, questioned more, hesitated, and without realizing it, he was now living what Helena had lived for years, being present and still unheard. Helena realized that true power made no noise at the exact moment she stopped explaining herself. For years, she had believed she owed the world context reasons for her choices, justifications for her limits, explanations for her silence. There was always someone she felt responsible to reassure: a husband, a social circle, a professional environment, invisible expectations. Now, something fundamental had shifted. She no longer owed access. This wasn't arrogance. It was clarity. Helena began filtering everything through a simple question: does this respect me? If the answer was no, she didn't negotiate. In her work, this translated into firmer boundaries. She demanded clear contracts, real autonomy, and respect for her decisions. Some opportunities disappeared immediately. Others far more aligned appeared in their place. She wasn't impressed by prestige anymore. She knew her value. Her brothers noticed the calm. There was no rush in her movements, no anxiety beneath her words. She didn't need to prove she was doing well, she simply was. Miguel observed one evening, "You don't look happy, you look whole." Helena smiled. "Happiness fluctuates," she replied. "Wholeness holds." Meanwhile, Ricardo felt the distance grow, not just physical or professional, but emotional. Every attempt to reach Helena met polite silence or brief, contained responses. No openings, no vulnerability. He tried invoking the past. "We built so much together." Helena replied evenly, "I built much of it alone. You just benefited." He tried remorse. "I wasn't myself back then," she answered. "You were? I just hadn't accepted it yet." The lack of anger unsettled him more than rejection ever could. Ricardo realized he had lost the most dangerous kind of access: emotional leverage. Without it, there was nothing left to negotiate. The woman he was seeing eventually left, not dramatically, just worn down. "You're always fighting something that's already gone," she said before walking away. Ricardo was alone, truly alone, not surrounded by silence, but by the absence of connection. Helena, on the other hand, was becoming something else entirely. Her name began to circulate beyond professional circles, not as a trend, but as a reference point. She was invited to speak, to advise, to observe. People didn't come to her looking for rescue. They came for grounding. In one talk, Helena said something that lingered long after the room emptied. "The greatest loss isn't divorce, failure, or collapse. It's losing access to the person who was holding you together without ever acknowledging their value." That sentence reached Ricardo and struck him like a mirror. One night, Ricardo did something he had never done before. He wrote a letter, not an email, not a message, a letter. He acknowledged his absence, his patterns, his avoidance. He didn't excuse himself. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He simply admitted what he had refused to see. When he finished, something painful dawned on him. He didn't know if Helena would even read it. Sending that letter was an act of humility that arrived late. Helena received it days later. She read it slowly, carefully, without emotion overtaking her. She recognized the sincerity, and she recognized the delay. She folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. She didn't reply, because some responses are no longer required once peace has already been achieved. Helena understood something final. Ricardo's regret no longer demanded action from her. It belonged to him, alone. The confrontation did not happen when Ricardo expected it to. He imagined something dramatic: a charged meeting, unresolved arguments, old wounds reopened. In his mind, that moment might still offer a kind of redemption, not complete, but enough to ease the weight he carried. But Helena no longer moved according to his expectations. The meeting happened months after the letter. It took place in a neutral space, a quiet cafe, far from business circles, far from anywhere that could turn the moment into a spectacle. Helena chose it deliberately. When Ricardo arrived, the first thing that unsettled him was her calm. She wasn't guarded. She wasn't tense. She wasn't preparing for battle. She looked like someone who had already resolved everything internally. "Thank you for coming," he said, trying to steady his voice. "I came to close this," she replied, without harshness. That sentence defined everything. Ricardo began explaining. He spoke about pressure, about losing himself, about how only now he understood what he had done. He talked about regret, loneliness, and the emptiness he could no longer outrun. Helena listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't correct him. She didn't rush him. When he finished, she remained silent for a moment. "You're right about one thing," she said finally. "You lost yourself." Relief crossed his face briefly. Then she continued, "But you lost yourself alone. I stayed too long trying to find you." The words were not cruel. They were final. Ricardo tried to defend himself. "I never meant to hurt you." Helena tilted her head slightly. "Hurt doesn't require intention," she said. "It requires repetition." He swallowed. "I know I came too late. You came after I had already left," she replied. Something broke inside him. "You'll never forgive me." Helena answered honestly. "Forgiveness isn't the issue," she said. "Forgiveness doesn't rebuild what was abandoned for years." She explained what he had never understood during their marriage. "You didn't lose me on the day of the affair. You lost me the day you stopped listening." Ricardo lowered his eyes. "I would give anything to go back." I wouldn't give anything, Helena said gently, because now I have everything I need. She stood up. I wish you peace, she said, but don't include me in your healing. She walked away without urgency, without drama. Ricardo stayed seated, realizing that this was not a conversation about reconciliation. It was an adult goodbye, and that hurt more than any argument ever had. After that day, something shifted permanently. Ricardo stopped trying to reach Helena, not because he had moved on, but because he finally understood. Some doors don't close with anger, they close with clarity. He began therapy late, reviewed his patterns, faced the emptiness he had always avoided by working harder. There was no public redemption, no triumphant comeback. There were consequences. Helena, meanwhile, felt something unexpected after that meeting. Lightness, not victory, not relief, lightness. She carried no unfinished conversations anymore. Nothing left to say, nothing left to explain. She was free. Time did not give anything back to Helena, and that was freeing. For a long time, she believed she needed to recover something lost years, delayed opportunities, versions of herself that never had a chance to exist. But as time passed, she understood that reconstruction did not work like compensation. It worked like conscious continuation. Helena continued working, growing, declining invitations that didn't align with her values, and accepting only those that respected her limits. Her consulting practice grew not into a loud empire, but into something solid. It became a reference. People came to her not to be saved, but to learn how not to disappear. She specialized in delicate processes, family successions, leadership crises, organizations governed by egos too large to listen. Helena didn't soften truth, but she never humiliated. Her authority came from coherence. Her brothers remained present, but now less as support and more as witnesses. Augusta once said seriously, "You become someone who doesn't need defense." Daniel laughed, watching the numbers. "You grew without urgency." That scares people more than fast success. Miguel rarely praised, but one day he said, "You built something that doesn't require a constant struggle." Helena was respected, not feared, not idealized, respected, and that carried a different weight. Years later, Helena was invited to speak at an international conference about leadership, emotional reconstruction, and quiet power. On stage, she shared part of her story without names, without victimhood, without spectacle. She said simply, "There is a kind of power that is born the moment you stop asking to be seen." The room fell silent. She continued, "Some people confuse love with permanence. Others confuse success with control. I learned that neither survives when you abandon yourself." The audience stood, not for drama, for truth. Ricardo saw that talk later, by chance, through a recording that circulated quietly. He recognized the voice, the posture, the clarity, and he recognized something else, more painful. She wasn't speaking to him anymore. The story wasn't about his regret. It wasn't about his mistakes. It was about who she became despite him. Ricardo closed the video before it ended, not out of anger, out of acceptance. One afternoon, Helena returned to her childhood home. Not out of need, out of choice. She sat with her brothers laughing at old memories, remembering a time when the world felt too large. Raphael asked suddenly, "Do you regret anything?" Helena thought, "Only that I waited so long to choose myself." The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was complete. That night, alone in her old room, Helena looked in the mirror. She wasn't searching for who she had been. She wasn't revisiting old pain. She saw someone grounded. And she understood something she had never been able to articulate before. She didn't win because her ex-husband fell. She won because she stood up and never stepped back.